welcome to the HR Book Club. In this series, we meet the authors behind the very best HR books. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Natal Dank, and we're going to be discussing her book, Agile HR. How are you, Natal?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Good. No worries. So, first off, it'd be great to start with introductions. So, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. So, as you said, I've co-wrote the book that is a year old now today,
Happy
which is Agile
birthday.
HR, and I'm known in the HR profession as one of the first people to embrace an agile mindset and really start to help HR professionals understand what's going on in the world of business when it comes to business agility and organizational agility, and what is HR's role in that. But also, how does it start to help us start to revolutionize our own results as well? I head up coaching, community, and learning at a company called PXO Culture. And we're just all about how do you modernize HR for the 21st century. And we work very specifically, very hands on with HR leaders and teams, looking at how do you evolve your operating model? How do you start to build human centric people practices and really deliver a kind of evidence based way of delivering value through the business?
Fantastic. So tell us a bit more about what the book is about and who's it particularly aimed at.
It is aimed at the HR profession. So it is
Yeah.
definitely, it was written with my peers and my colleagues in mind. It I've had a lot of people that are in general business roles, possibly roles such as, say, communications and marketing, and definitely a lot of agile coaches that have really enjoyed it as well. But we wanted something that spoke the language of people in people, culture, organizational change, L&D, or those kind of roles. We want it to be really accessible for them. So it's definitely for that audience. And purposely, because Agile comes from a history of being very related to tech. And a lot of people, when they first start to try and understand the concepts, they find it a bit hard to connect to, very techy in terms of the terminology. And so the whole purpose was to break that down.
Yeah, okay. So you co-authored the book, right? So how did you find that as a sort of writing experience? I imagine in some ways that could perhaps been a bit more challenging had you perhaps done it yourself. So how was that experience?
Yeah, it was very challenging actually. So I've talked to other people that said it's hard. I think writing a book is hard anyway. So
Yeah.
a friend of mine always says that you always meet people that are saying that they're writing a book, not as many people that have written a book, and that's because the it's interesting because I think if you're someone like ourselves who perhaps does a lot of kind of presentations, lots of talks, lots of blogs, you kind of think, oh yeah, or books along those lines, but it's actually quite an intense creative process, and this it's something about kind of translating all your knowledge and experiences and case studies into something that's accessible and people will want to read is really hard. Yeah, so I can't say to anyone that it's a walk in the park. And I think if I ever repeated it, I think I would go and lock myself in a how a little cabin in the woods for 6 months or something, because it's also well, I suppose it's like times when people do a PhD or something like that. You really need to take time out of the other parts of your life, because it takes over everything. And it's very hard to run a business at the same time. So that's what I would say to people is, and if you think about creativity, it's not a business project, it's creativity. So you're going to write a chapter and it's going to be crap. And then you've got to be okay with that. And you've got to be, and then of course you iterate and you build on that and you get feedback, and that's kind of agile as well. But I think writing is hard because there's this feel of if you sat there for ages, over a period of time to write that chapter and then it's crap. But actually, by going through all of that, you learn then how to write it. So I feel that I think there's times where you feel like there's a wasteful effort, and it's not. It's the creative process and kind of exploring how to go about a certain topic or way of expressing something. But that can be hard to learn, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I just wonder how you like divided the different chapters. Did you, I'll do this chapter, you do that chapter. How, like,
Yeah,
how did
we
you
did.
do that?
We did do that, and
Oh, okay.
well, we kind of had areas where we feel that we've had more kind of maybe experience or case studies to draw on. So we naturally had kind of topics that we felt were more were the right ones to take on. So
Yeah.
that's where we started. But ultimately, when you write a book with somebody else, you've got to constantly get them to then read it and vice versa. And so I think it probably adds to the length of the process, to be honest. Yeah.
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 Okay. So you talked about this cabin in the woods for next time you write a book. Does
Definitely.
that mean that there's another book on the cards?
Not right at this moment, but
Okay.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Excellent. So we always end our HR book club interviews with a recommendation for a HR book, or maybe even a book that a HR professional should read. So, yeah, which would be your recommendation, Natal?
So I've got a couple here for you.
Okay.
So the first one is, if anyone wants to kind of have a good way of understanding why business agility is so important in the modern marketplace, I think you can't go wrong with starting with Stephen Denning, Age of Agile. And it's really good because the first part of it talks about what's happening in the world of work and why is agile a way of finding the answers and kind of modernizing how we do work. So if anyone's into future of work, what kind of skills do you need? How do you build operating models? That's great for you. The second part is also just how kind of the capitalist system, I suppose, and the way we do economics can kind of undo some of the things we're trying to achieve when we're building these more sustainable business models. So I think it's just a really good business book for HR
Okay.
people to read. The next one is Sprint. This has been around for a while. I'm trying to get my camera angle right.
That's about
Um,
right.
and this is I think, the go-to on how to run a design sprint in your teams. And that's, I think, if nothing else, if you don't do anything else in terms of taking an agile mindset, taking in concepts of how to apply design thinking and prototype and test a solution very rapidly before you release anything into the business. That is just number one. It's also what you should be doing in business in general. And this book will give you a little 5-day format to follow, and and it just works really well. So that's a big tip. And then
Okay.
something sort of interesting is called Invisible Women, and it's exploring how the world of AI and data analytics has some gender bias in it. And you can, of course, start there. And because, as we know, in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion, there is some real challenges around how we break down bias in how we're using data. And I think with AI becoming such a central part of how we run the world, not just sort of
Mhm.
business, we should start to kind of really interrogate that and have better conversations around it.
Fantastic. Natal, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.